listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author Sarah Box, where you get the inside scoop on the steps action takers and decision makers take to align their purpose to their principles and achieve their goals in business and life. We focus on the mantra, no labels, no limits, no excuses. Each week, you'll hear from remarkable guests who have overcome challenges and obstacles to succeed in the face of adversity. By listening to their stories, you'll get practical tips, tools, and resources you can implement today to bust through your own internalized prisons of worry and doubt. And now, without further ado, please welcome your commanding coach with plenty of chutzpah and heart, Sarah Box.
Hi everyone, this is Sarah, your host of the No Labels, No Limits podcast. As you know, this is the place where we talk about all those things that help us bust through our limiting labels and beliefs so that we can live a no labels, no limits, and no excuses lifestyle. Today, our guest is Stacey Turmel. Now, this is going to be a tough little background to read because Stacey is kind of all over the place. She is the CEO and managing director of the Internet is for Everyone LLC. And that's a web accessibility compliance company that offers website, mobile app accessibility compliance evaluation, along with legal case analysis and expert witness consulting. So as you might know or guess from that is she's an attorney and she is also a digital accessibility expert. She's frequently asked to serve in that role as a consultant and subject matter expert for digital product design and development. And as you know, the more time we spend on our digital gadgets, the more important it is for it to be accessible to everyone. And what I really love about Stacey is her dedication to helping female business owners and entrepreneurs make things happen that they never thought would be possible. So today, in addition to just learning more about her journey, we're actually going to dig into one of her passions and focuses, and that's on working with professional women to help them to continue to reinvent themselves. Pick me, pick me. I think reinvention is an ongoing exploration, and just in a little bit of pre-chat, Stacey brings a lot of insight that I think you're going to love. So let's just get to it. I want to welcome you to the podcast, Stacey. It's really great to finally have you on the show.
Thank you, Sarah. It's really great to be here. I really appreciate the invite.
So I like to start by asking our guests kind of a similar question, a little bit different from each person's perspective, but is there something that you do daily that keeps you focused on your own dreams and goals?
I would say yes. So every day at the end of the day, what I do is I write a to-do list for what I want to get done the next day. And it accomplishes two goals for me. One is as things are flowing through my head at sometimes a ridiculous pace, I can just write them down. And the second is I feel like that clears my mind because I know I've written it down. And so I just leave like one of those small notepads out that I write it for the next day. And then that's what I'm looking at taking care of. I try to do it in order of priority if possible, but if something just randomly pops in my head, I go in there, even if it's like at 10:30 at night, right before I'm going to bed, I go in there and write it down. So it clears my mind. So I'm not like running it over and over in my mind while I'm supposed to be trying to sleep.
Well, and then you don't wake up the next morning going, what was I supposed to remember, right? And then you're spending time racking your brain about that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let me just ask you to back up a little bit and share a little bit of your background and what led you first into becoming an attorney and then to creating your company.
Well, I've been an attorney for 27 years. And the reason why I wanted to go to law school at the time when I was younger was I wanted to have unending learning opportunities. And at the time, being a scrappy 22-year-old, I also wanted to have unending earning opportunities. I just did not want to have any limits whatsoever. And I wanted to be able to just have like the sky is wide open, for whatever I wanted to pursue. And so I've had the opportunity over the past 27 years to practice many different areas of the law, still primarily in the area of litigation. And I've also had the opportunity to work in higher education administration. And it was in higher education administration that I had the opportunity to work with a blind law student, which basically served as the springboard into, evaluating and just investigating how blind people use the internet, because I was pretty ignorant. I'm just going to be candid. I was pretty ignorant at the time. So that's what allowed me to do that. And then with an onslaught of litigation that was going on in the area with businesses being sued left and right on something new called ADA website accessibility, it just really caught my attention, because I was surprised that we weren't using blind people to test websites as a potential source of employment opportunity for them, when we're using blind people to sue companies because of inaccessible websites. So that's kind of what brought it to the forefront of my mind, that particular area.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, you actually started, basically you asked the question, why weren't we using blind people to test them? But you actually, that was your hired crew, right? Those were your experts that helped you test.
Yeah,
Now,
and that's what I did. I met with that law student that I told you about, who's since graduated law school, and because I was just amazed at her. She is just a tech whiz, and I'm just in awe of her skills and abilities. And so I asked her if she ever had tested any websites and if she saw value in that. And she was like, "Yeah, really? You'd be interested in something like that?" And I was like, "I think it's what we need to do. I mean, it's the whole point is to make it more accessible. So why wouldn't we listen to you, who's the one experiencing the inaccessibility, and how we can make it better?"
it's hard to, if you're not in that position like she is, you don't know. Like you might say, "Oh, this is the issue," and she would say, "Oh, that's really not an issue. This is the issue." So that sounds like that might have been really innovative when you first started doing that.
It was innovative to the point of being ignored. And
What do you mean?
what I mean by that is, there is a certain population in corporate America that takes the mindset of la 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 la. We don't want to focus on that. I don't want to know that this is a problem. I don't want to deal with that. And then there's also, just the general stigmatism that goes, that is applied to people with disabilities in general. I mean, I remember when my colleague, she said to me, "Stacey, people with disabilities are treated similarly to people who are felons. Nobody wants to come near them and nobody wants to talk to them." And I was just like really struck by that. I was like, what? And it's a fear-based response, Sarah, because they're different, right? So you're not sure how to interact with them, not sure how to talk, and it just comes from, it's new and different. And so if you think about it, the more time that you spend with somebody who might be perceived as different, the more that you get comfortable with them. And the more that you get comfortable with them, that fear subsides, and then you're just able to interact. So, people with disabilities are different. And so that's why they're generally kind of shunned to a certain extent. So
how did that experience change you personally, Stacey? What can you look and go, just because of this period of time, I am different in this way?
Oh, I would say that, I look at everything now as, what would it be like to be in those shoes? So from just an empathy standpoint, and then, selfishly to myself, I'm thankful for all of the abilities I do have, because to a certain extent, I don't know if I'd be a strong enough person to be able to navigate my life without the abilities that I do have. And so, for that, I am greatly appreciative. It also makes me look at so many different things, especially like I can't help but look at a website now to determine whether or not it's accessible. I look at emails that come out to determine whether they're accessible and think about, like my colleague, she can't use a mouse, right? She's blind. She can't use a mouse. She wouldn't know where the mouse is, Sarah. I mean, it's not helpful. So she's got to navigate everything she does using a keyboard. So if you think about that, and just, the next time you go to a website, try to go wander through with a keyboard, it seems like a very daunting task. And that's something that she has to do on a regular basis. And she's a whiz at it. So I look at things from that lens. And then I also, I think we tend to look at things like we hear something like, for example, certain transportation agents are now offering services to people who have pets, which is great if you are somebody with a service animal. That's what we think about in theory. But what's the reality of that? So I guess it's really helped me bridge those two. What's the reality of that? How many drivers out there are willing to pick somebody up with a big dog, that are trying to make driving quick and fast, and they make money based on how fast they can turn around a ride? And the reality is that not many, so
I think about that.
Great. Yeah.
Like when I work with business and they say, our goal is to increase access to, and I say, there's no point of increasing access. Your goal is to increase usage, because the access is a how, like we're going to, and because of that very thing, Stacey's like, we're going to increase access for people with dogs. So what? How many routes do you have those drivers on? Do they go out to the more rural areas?
Right.
All of that stuff. But you can't unsee, no pun intended, but you can't unsee once you've been taught something. You're thinking, wow, that doesn't get you there from here. So.
Right. So it's just, I think, and as a lawyer, especially being a litigator, we're inherent in that skill set is the ability to break things down into tiny little pieces. I mean, that's sometimes how we can win something, is by looking at a tiny little piece that may or may not be, salient for a particular case. And so it's just how I look at the world in little pieces. And so when I look at somebody's experience, it just puts me in a position of breaking it down into smaller pieces and just getting a sense of, what is her experience like, to get to understand, just for purposes of having an idea on what she is living through, to try to bridge the gap between businesses and organizations that are struggling with that accessibility requirement and getting them up to speed. So I guess what you could say I'm doing is I'm taking a backdoor approach of promoting accessibility through helping businesses understand where their risks are. And at the same time, I'm, counseling them on the fact that, compliance is always going to win the day over a defense position in a very expensive court case.
Before I shift gears, I want to ask you one other question about this particular area of your work, because I want to flip it and think about it from a larger business perspective. And what are the initial reluctancies to make changes? Is it, there's compliance, right, is required, but beyond that, like at a personal or leadership level, what tend to be the reluctancies?
I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I'll see articles that are written in many different platforms that'll say website compliance will cost you $500,000. That's not true, or these quick fix organizations out there that are just capitalizing on the ignorance, which is for $49 a month, I can make your website accessible. That doesn't work. You have to bake accessibility in. So it's this wide sweeping range of just misunderstandings and misconceptions on what it requires. And it's reasonable accessibility, making a reasonable accommodation. And so, I guess that's when the lawyer comes in. And so I think that's what the difficulty is. And also, nobody wants to hear that the work that they did is not correct, right? I mean, that's generally not a good conversation. So to have a conversation with somebody who just built the most beautiful website, or what they believe is the most beautiful website in the world, and they just did it, and then to tell them that it's not accessible, that's a difficult conversation to have, because they could have poured their heart and soul into it. And I get it, that's really frustrating. But it's going to be even more frustrating when you're paying $25,000 for an initial retainer to an attorney because you've been slapped with an accessibility lawsuit.
Yes, perception and then getting it done. Better information is always good. And You're correct. Once you pour your heart and soul into something, you want to at least have it live for a little while before someone says, no good. You got to fix it. Can it live for a month, please? I just want to see it.
Can I just enjoy it? Can I just look at it
for the moment?
For just
I'll
a month.
Take some recordings of it.
I get it.
I know, but that's the conversation I'm sure you have to have.
Yeah.
Okay. So what has led you down your path? And specifically what I'm thinking about, in a previous conversation, you said to me that you feel like you're living your life backward. Why do you say that?
I feel like I'm living my life backwards because the things that I appreciate now are things that I had an opportunity to appreciate as a younger person. I think I made mention to you about, as a young kid in college and law school, I was just looking to check a box, whatever was going to get me done the fastest and out the door and moving on to what's next. Because that's what I was focusing on. What was next? Like I had a carrot dangling over my head, but it was actually attached to me. So every time I moved, so did the carrot. So I was never catching it because there was always a what's next. But in just a compulsive manner, not really paying attention to what was going on now. And just over the past, I'd say 10 years of my life, just learning that it's not really checking a box isn't really what's giving me joy in my life. It's, being a lifelong learner. So that's why I say living my life backwards. I'm, going back and learning and spending time on things that I fully had access to as a younger person. But now I'm just doing it with more appreciation. And I'm also doing it with more interest and more focus. And it's being done because I want to gain the knowledge, not because I'm looking at basically checking off a form. So I think to that extent, it's just, all of the things that I've learned throughout that journey have put me to the place where I am now, which is to spend the time to gain the knowledge. And I just want to keep learning. And so I think that's why I've had the opportunity to do so many things that I've done in my life, both as an attorney, just also in other industries, because I've been willing to keep learning.
Random question, which I'm known for. Have you taken any personality typing tests? So for instance, like Enneagram, Myers-Briggs, DISC, Strength Finders?
I've done DISC. And so I fell on like a double driver is what is how I was characterized. So I've had that. And then with some of the other personality testing that I've had, it's more of just falling into what has been called like an enigma category. Is very driven, but also very in tune, like a great ability to read the room, if you will.
Yep. Just curious, because I would have some predictions, which I'm not going to share with you in case you take any of the others. But if you do take them, circle back. I want to know how they come out.
Okay. All right.
Because I have some predictions, which I would write down in my book, and then you could say, what did you think?
Okay.
So, you talk about living your life backwards and the carrot, and that pursuit is kind of like a fallacy. You never catch it. You just keep moving it ahead of you. So how have that mix of business activities and learning, how have they helped you feel fulfilled in your life?
Oh, I don't know if I completely feel fulfilled right now. I think for me that is probably going to be a permanent goal. You know, you asked me about my goals, and I would say that would be a permanent goal, is to continue to pay attention to, you know, what I have going on now and appreciating, you know, the different nuances of whatever that experience might be. I think it's a lofty goal. You know, I try to think about, I'd like to get something from every experience that I have, whether it's good or bad. And, you know, and that sounds really great in theory when you and I are having a wonderful conversation, and I'm enjoying, you know, this interaction. But, you know, if I were to have an interaction with somebody who's, you know, just maybe, I don't know, it doesn't go well, I don't know initially if my response would be, what was the benefit of that interaction? You know, I think
That wouldn't be your first go-to.
I don't think it would be. I don't think I'm as evolved. So I would have
No,
to
my
say
goal is
that.
just to make that question closer and closer to those events, right? Like it might,
Yeah,
instead of a month away or a week away, just go, maybe even the next day, like, wow, what was that all about?
right. Yeah. And just putting it into perspective, right? And not taking responsibility for other people's issues, you know, which is
Yeah,
something that I think professional overachieving women like to do, because our hope is that if we keep trying harder, we can fix it all. And that's not realistic.
we can't.
So,
I think I'm done then, since I can't do it. No, you know, what's so funny is and this is what I love about the podcast and having the opportunity to meet and talk with so many brilliant women, is that is a common conversation we have, whether it's on air or not, is like, you know, that striving, all it gets you is practice striving. You know,
yes.
you just keep evolving and learning. But I'm super curious about your focus on the women professionals who continue to reinvent themselves. Can you talk about that? Like, what do you do around that? What's your focus on that? What's your hope with that?
I think my focus on that is, you know, anytime I'm interacting with any other women colleagues, um, you know, for whatever reason, I tend to just zero in, especially if, you know, they're having a difficult time, on making sure that they understand that there are options. So looking at creative resolutions to difficult situations. You know, something that I've had the opportunity to spend time with colleagues. I mean, I'm in my mid 50s, and I'd be lying if I said that I had friends and colleagues who haven't had difficulty, you know, moving to a different career or job. You know, it's something that has been, you know, very difficult and a struggle, something that, you know, I've personally experienced. And so, you know, whenever I'm interacting with a colleague, friend, or coaching client, my goal is to let them see that there are other options for them. It might not necessarily be the option that they had originally planned on. It might not necessarily be part of their master plan, but that if they could just take a step back, let's reframe this and look at this as an opportunity to explore other options that might be, you know, a better fit for them. You know, trying to look at failure as, or whatever their perception of failure is, because I don't believe in it, as an opportunity for reinvention and an opportunity to pivot and to take advantage of something that might actually work out so much better than what they had originally put together. So I like to dig through that.
When you're having conversations with your clients and you're coaching folks around that, Stacey, is there an initial reluctance to want to let go of what they're holding on to? Like, this is no, I need to do X.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that goes to, you know, anytime that there's change, right? There's actually there's a grieving process that goes with change. My dad is a psychologist, and so he writes about grief and loss, and he and I have had many spirited conversations about, you know, I share with him that grief and loss is actually part of business, you know, and that if some of the psychological principles surrounding grief and loss that he talks about were employed in business, in which I think can be extrapolated to, entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, or just really anybody personally down to a granular level. Grief and loss is all about it. So, right, there's the initial stage of denial, right? I don't want to let this go. And then there's anger. Why do I have to let this go? And then there's sadness, like, crap, I really have to let this go, and then you hope that the healing process takes place to be able to see beyond that and hopefully not get stuck in any of those one areas. But are people able to pivot super easily? No. And I think another reason for that is because women generally, just in my experience from the litigation work that I've done, and also just from the interactions that I've had, we tend to spend a lot of time analyzing and paying attention to details and really doing a lot of research and due diligence to find something that we really like and then become very invested in it. It's usually not like a skimming the surface type situation. So when you have somebody who's really invested in something, it would be, of course, incredibly difficult to have them, they're just not going to necessarily go, okay, yeah, I'll let that go. Like a light switch.
Well, there is that, the whole sunk cost of time,
Yes.
Emotional energy, all of that. And I'm trying to remember, there was a really good study on that, but it ties back to we think our used stuff is so worth so much more than anybody would give for it. And I love the reframing when someone says, no, you have to think like you've never done this and now you're going to buy it. What would you pay for it? Well, I'd pay $3 for that mug. And the person selling it goes, no, this is very special. It's a $10 mug. Like, keep it, right? So, yeah. But part of it is you're right. It's that investment. I've sunk so much time and energy, and perhaps even a bit of my sense of self, right? Because for me, in the whole pivoting piece of it, it has become easier as I've let go and not identified as deeply with a role, right? Like, who am I as a person versus who am I in a function? And that's not like something you flip a light switch. That takes inner work, conversations, right? Which is why coaching is so valuable, right? To have someone ask you and help you think like, well, I've got some bad assumptions here, right? And yes, I am grieving. So that's powerful. So what are you seeing with folks who are able to do that? Like, is there something like that just happens for them that makes you even that much more committed to the work?
I think for me, it's, and I think that this comes from just my background as a litigator. One of the things that we have to do in litigation is we have to be able to look at what's not just around the corner, but what's around the corner, down the bend, and like 5 miles from now, in order to try to make the best strategic decisions possible. And so one of the things that I find to be really helpful is having a conversation with people on, okay, well, let's follow that through to its logical conclusion, and just kind of like walking them through. So then what would happen after that? What would happen after that? And then backing it up into, well, what about this particular direction? What do you think that could provide for you? And, depending on what people's attachments are, because we all come to the table with different baggage and experiences, right? Depending on what people's attachments are, some people might need to hear, that, oh, okay, so I can limit my risk here, like limit my losses, and I could actually look at this, and this will create such a greater opportunity. So why would I want to spend more time trying to maybe mine, for a limited return when I could have much more opportunity on this other side? But they have to be able to be open to be able to see that. And so that takes some time for them to make that shift, and it's not going to happen overnight. So I think that is definitely a really big help.
In your work, do you find that there are some common ways that female business owners and entrepreneurs tend to underestimate what they're capable of?
I actually just had this conversation today at lunch. It's like, both a colleague of mine, she just transitioned her practice into another firm. And it was just, why do we always have this feeling that we need to come to the table with all of these promises and, that we're going to provide to try to in some way demonstrate our value. And it's like, you don't need to demonstrate your value. Your value is there, but it's just bridging that gap and believing it. I mean, like even to this day, when I'm putting together presentations for different continuing legal education providers, I'm going through it with a fine-tooth comb, and then I'm also reviewing it beforehand. I know it like the back of my hand, but, I just want to make sure I don't want to screw it up, because that's important to me, But I think just for professional women in general, for whatever reason, we feel like this need to compensate, and think that we need to bring more and accept less, and it's so dysfunctional. And it's something that I think, I mean, I know it's something that I'm working on a regular basis. So, and it's recognizing that you have that innate value. Because if you don't believe you're worth it, nobody else is going to believe you're worth it. I heard a quote one time that said, you showing up small in the world serves no one.
That's true.
And it's just from the different conversations that I've had with people where they're just like, well, I don't want to overdo it too much. Like, why not? Why not? I mean, you're an expert in your field. I mean, that's what experts do. Be you, Don't
Seems
play
kind of
yourself
crazy.
down. Yeah, I know.
But it is what it is. And that's so funny. Your example you gave on the PowerPoint or the presentation slide deck and mistakes, right? And I'm thinking it is hard to sit knowing that something is not perfect. And I have worked where it's like, no, it has to be 100% perfect. Guess what? I don't know a soul. I can look at your stuff and find something. Oh, I think the kerning on that spacing's off a little, Stacey. You might want to fix it. Really, Sarah? You might be the only person who will notice that. Is that necessary? Did that help Stacey in any way? I don't think so, right? That just served your need to find something. So I make myself now stop.
Wow.
Oh, it's not easy, Stacey. Oh. I was talking to someone, just pausing in the discomfort is the exercise, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, Sarah, that's it. Hand it off. Mm-hmm. You are done. Mm-hmm. There's someone who's going to look at it and make it way better. You're not the be all end all. But it's hard.
Yeah, no, it is. And I mean, what's so funny is that, with the different people that I work with, I'll be just like, good and out the door is always better than perfect and
sitting in your inbox.
And so I'll have that conversation, but there I'll be scanning my email for the third time.
I know, my God. I've tried to teach myself to laugh. Like, I will send text, and I'm sure I'm not the only one, especially if I rely on voice. Because if I'm not like right in front of my phone and I'm like sideways to it, and then I'll read whatever I'm going, are you kidding me? And half the time I'm sending it to my husband. He goes, I don't really know what this means here. And had that been to a client, I would have been mortified. But I actually started laughing about it now. It's like, yeah, that's like going too fast. I need to slow down.
Well, so I think it's also just, I mean, just getting comfortable with just like taking ownership of things, right? Of like everything. So if I guess, my thought process has been, as I'm trying to evolve myself, so if that email goes out and somebody gets back to me and they're just like, you missed a comma, do I want to work with that person? I mean, if that's their level of focus, do I want to work with that person? And the answer is probably no. I mean, if that's their decision-making level, that it's a comma, you're good, no comma, you're bad, then, maybe it's time to reevaluate what my standards are, or what their standards are.
Well, and back to your original thing that you don't really believe in failure, right? It's information.
Right. Great information. So just flipping it on myself and just trying to, reevaluate and just being like, yeah, sorry, now if I were to send something out to somebody with the wrong name,
it's not so good.
That's not good at all. I mean, that's
Stacey.
just careless. Yeah. Dear Stacey. Yeah.
So What do you think in your working with women and your own exploration is the link between motivation, procrastination, and action? That, like, where in that little triad do you see some of our problems?
Well, I think it depends on their working style, right? For me, I'm very deadline driven. I mean, that's just how I am, and so I've had to learn to adapt my working style to those characteristics. So what that means is that I build in deadlines for myself and I put them on my calendar and I write them out on my list like I was sharing with you at the beginning. And that operates to create the sense of urgency in me that I need sometimes to get my head out of my rear end and get moving. It just is part of it. And also just to I also know that when I get in the flow of something, momentum for me is huge. And so being able to create the momentum. So that is something else that just evaluating from my own working style, finding out what works for me. And so just doing like reading and just gathering as much information as I can on those different things. I mean, I'm not looking at 5 best ways to hack your email list. I mean, that's not something that's going to resonate with me, but I am looking at, what works for my personal working style that's going to get me moving. And so what works for me is, I know that I need to sit down because I'm a huge procrastinator, just a huge procrastinator. So I've learned that I just need to sit down and just start with something that I like to do. And then, and so that's why when I'm building in my to-do list, I might look down at the bottom and go, yeah, all right. So, taking care of number 10 might not be super like urgent, but it's something that's going to get me moving. So I'm going to take care of number 10 because I'm cool with number 10. And then that's going to get me moving. And then once I have number 10 down, then it's like, okay, I got that sense of accomplishment. And it just, energizes you to keep going, and build up. I know there's some schools of thought about, just, grab on to the biggest challenge first. I don't know if that's really, I mean, maybe for some people that works. That doesn't really work for me. I need to just kind of get in the zone. And then I'm just, I become like unstoppable as far as moving through stuff. I also know that on the days where I'm not very productive, I'm not feeling really great as far as, I'd rather be productive and accomplish things. And I know that that feeling at the end of the day of getting things done is definitely something that continues to motivate me as far as moving forward to get other things done. So I think it's paying attention to different people's working styles. Mm-hmm. There are some people out there, who they're just like, they're constantly going to be moving and doing things. And they just put things in and they just get it done and they never stop. And other people, they want to just like, okay, what's the biggest challenge I can tackle first today? So I think it's paying attention to that.
Have you noticed over time in your career that your work style has changed, or has that pretty much been the same since you were like in college?
Oh, no, it's definitely changed. I mean, I know when I first opened my law firm, because of being just such a procrastinator, I was engaging in what I can candidly call is seagull management, where I'd get in there at the last minute, crap all over everything as far as this is all the stuff I need done. And then I'm out the door at my next appointment, and
I have never heard that.
Really? Yeah.
No, but it's so visual, I will never forget it. Right. And I'm going to go, seagull management. I got it. Hey, I've worked for some seagull managers, and I've got to tell you, it's not good being a managee under a seagull manager.
No. And just so FYI. That, yeah, no, I completely agree. And so it was also, stressful because I'm running late, and I'm just like, I'm not articulating what I want done very clearly because I'm rushing. And then when I would come back from whatever it was, court, hearing, or whatever it might be, then I'd be just looking at work product that wasn't accurate. And then I'd be, frustrated about that because now I had to fix it. And the whole reason I had to fix it is because I didn't take enough time at the front end, to articulate what I really needed, so that when I came back, it was good work product. And so it was just, learning that throughout a process of years, as far as just understanding that that's not really an effective management style. And that's also not a good communication style. And
So
if I
how
don't want to have to,
contrast that with today? Now you're not a Siegel manager.
no. So today, I mean, one of the things that I've learned, and actually it was my work experience. I had a few years where I worked in higher education administration, taught me, pacing, and it was painful, but boy, was it a much needed a lesson, for the, the eager attorney who's flying by the seat of her pants. So, just learning to pace, because I was put in charge of a group of people that I had absolutely no authority over, so I had to learn pacing. I had to learn buy-in. I had to learn clear communication so that I could set expectations and then get good work product. But those are lessons that I take with me today, and just being able to, candidly share those has given me the opportunity to be able to share those stories about those experiences which were not good for me, and use it to punctuate the importance of, articulating what you're looking for, asking that person, what have they heard? What feedback do they have? What additional questions do they have? So that when the product is delivered, whatever it is, the deliverable that you've asked for, you're getting what you want.
Yep. When I'm rushed, like that whole description of rushing in and saying, okay, this is what needs to happen. When that happens, and thankfully it's not that often, because I've gotten much better about thinking way out what's coming and what might other people I'm working with have on their plates I know nothing about. Because it's good to think I'm the only one in the world, but that's not it, right?
Right.
So, but when there's a misstep, let's say, I always go, okay, what was my last communication? And I'm really consistent. I put most things in writing for myself, like, so I can go back and say, what did we talk about? And I'll look, anytime there's like a glitch, I'm going, girl, it was on your end. You did not close that loop. You did not say, by when do you want this or whatever.
Right.
But it really is that. And so I've learned not to jump on someone, because first of all, it saves me from apologizing for being a jerk, right? Instead of saying, okay, how can we do this better? This is what I did, but you guys got to tell me when you don't understand what the heck I'm talking about too, So I love that whole thing about like pacing and communicating, making sure that's it. So talk a little bit about goals briefly, about like, because, there's always this talk about big goals. How do you set goals? What's the path? All of that. And there are a number of different approaches to doing that, Stacey. So when you're working with someone to create a goal, maybe it's one of the gals you're working with, right, to redesign or reinvent themselves, and they're setting goals, but they're coming from somewhere else. What are some of the first steps you have people do or think about so they can move on?
I think one of the first things I ask them about is, like, where do you want to end up? Like what is, like Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind, to where do you want to end up? And sometimes that answer isn't necessarily a place. Sometimes it might be a feeling. It might be an experience. It might be an interaction. And so just, and building on that. And then, asking, what do they see as being an obstacle preventing them from getting there? Because then what we start to do is flush out what are already the perceived barriers, which may or may not be accurate, Sarah, but at the same time, it's their perception, and that's what needs to shift. Not change. I don't like to use the word change, but shift, because that's something that they have to make happen. I can't make that happen for them. I can try to ask questions to maybe illuminate some different options, but it's up to them to make that shift if they can. And then when we start to, we start to flesh out what the obstacles are, then what we're doing is we're articulating, starting to articulate a framework, right? Which is what are some potential resistance points that we're going to come up with. And then we go back to, okay, what's the overall goal? And so what do you think that we need to have in place in order to get to that goal? And then we start to, put in what I call, check-in points, or just, mini goals, if you will, like on that road, right? I guess you would call them like rest stops that you would achieve on the way to whatever that destination might be. So if it's like, well, I want to get certified in change management, so that I need to do this. Okay, so where do you want to end up working? And they articulate that. So the certification. So let's look at that. Where is it offered? What's the time limits? And just breaking it in there. And then, what are the shifts that need to be made to scaffold into that whole particular process? And then also get an estimate on how long they think that would take. Like, how long do you think it would take for you to take that certification? We would need to look at when it's offered, because what happens is that, through like basically expanding a decision tree, is you're breaking things down into, subcategories of, other points that need to be accomplished that are going to feed into that overall process, that overall change process. And so it's going through that. And sometimes what will happen is different subcategories might be more expanded than others. And so it might take a little bit longer. And then starting to build in there places to, achieve those goals and those subcategories, so that you can build momentum. Because I've found that momentum is so powerful. When somebody feels momentum, then they feel empowered. They feel good. They feel like they're moving forward. They feel limitless, and they feel like, it's like it just opens up their whole mind and shifts it from a fear-based standpoint into, just it's like a breath, and then they can see the possibility. And I think that's what's most important, is to get people to see the possibility of what, those options could be.
As you're talking, you talk about the scaffolding. I have this visual of someone like, climbing, handhold climbing on a rock face, and they just get high enough that they can actually see beyond the horizon. It's like, okay, I know there's more, right? So I'll keep going. I'm not giving up. Yes, this is arduous, but I've got these little step, next grip. But then you're right. All of a sudden you get elevated. And then when you get to the top of that, you look up and you go, oh, there's another horizon. But it's a landing place, right? It's just a scaffold so that you can see higher and go further. So I really like your visual analogies. They work for me, Stacey. Just want to say, hey, so, okay, I'm imagining there are listeners saying, I need to connect with Stacey. Number one, she's smart. She's really a detailed thinker and can help me think through contingencies and risk planning, especially if I'm, need to do that either from a business perspective, website side and compliance, or personal life. So what is the best way for folks to connect with you? And then is there anything special that you have to offer folks?
Well, I think for any of your listeners, Sarah, I'd be happy to offer them free 30 minutes with me, and I think that it's important for two reasons. One is, you get an opportunity to have a conversation, and then we both get, which gives us each an opportunity to determine if it's a good fit, And so hopefully,
how do I get that?
Yeah. So I would say that the best way to get in touch with me is through my email address, which is Stacey, Stacey, at StaceyTurmel.com, which is StaceyTurmel.com.
Okay, we'll make sure that's in the show notes. And it's so funny because I'm redesigning my website and I haven't made any major changes right now, but I'm thinking, except on the back end, right? The behind the scenes coding, which by the way, I'm not doing, but that's not my strength. All these years, I've learned what I can do and what I should do and what I should not do. And I like to understand how things work, but I've learned, like many things, you should understand and let go.
I know, right?
It just, understanding helps me ask better questions, but I don't need to be
Yes.
tinkering in other people's expertise. So, but you've given me some things to think about today and bring back to my team to really look at. And I remember working with a statewide group of hearing impaired folks who taught me a ton about facilitating and what that looked like. And I thought, yeah, it's similar to you. You don't know what you don't know because you just are used to
Right.
your own experience. So
Right.
thank you for opening my world, and I'm sure our listeners' worlds, to considering things differently, because we take a lot for granted what we're able to do. Especially if we
Thank you for
haven't
having
had
me, Sarah. It was great.
Yeah. So cool. Thanks, Stacey. And I'm sure we'll be back in touch.
All right. Take care, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the No Labels, No Limits podcast with best-selling author, change agent, and strategic vision coach, Sarah Box. You can grab the show notes and find out how to work with Sarah at sarahbox.com/No Labels, No Limits podcast. We'd love this podcast to reach as many people as possible. So please remember to rate, leave a 5-star review, and share the podcast with someone you think would get value from this conversation. Until next time, keep taking those daily action steps to align your purpose to your principles and achieve your goals in business and life.